Okay, so I'm Erin Gruich and I am the owner of Sensational Path. I'm an occupational therapist and I'm a mom of 2 boys. I graduated from occupational therapy school back in 2000, so I've been an occupational therapist for 20 years. And over the course of my career, I've taken a lot of courses in sensory integration and in autism intervention, in behavior management and managing challenging behaviors. And back in June, we were experiencing a lot of behaviors of our own at home. We had been at home doing homeschooling since March, so 3 months, March, April, May, yeah, 3-4 months. And we were starting to have behaviors like acting out. And I was seeing it in my own kids, but I was also seeing it in other kids and seeing kids who are normally pretty chill and easygoing who would just cry when you changed the plan or when something didn't go their way. And so I started talking about behaviors more and putting it out there, and I wasn't alone is what I discovered back in June. And so I ran a course called the Roots of Behaviour. And my plan was to have 5 moms join this group, and I had 10, and so it was great. And so, here we are still in 2020, and we're still seeing behaviors, right? For me, I noticed that when we started to increase our restrictions where we weren't able to go out, we started to see more behaviors. Hi, Norma. And I put the question out again, and other people were seeing it as well. So I'm going to pose a question on a scale of 1 to 10. How would you rate behaviors in your house? 1 being we don't have any behaviors, and 10 being you're seeing an increase in behaviors. You're seeing lots of behaviors. Hello, Nicole. Hello, Norma. Oh, there's lots of people on here that I don't know, but I want to know you. So tell me where you're from. Where are you watching from? I know Jade's on here. I'm so excited to have you here. Yeah, so tonight we're going to talk a little bit about what behaviors we're seeing. And I really want to explain to you that we need to understand the behavior before we try to manage it. So all behavior has a function. There's always a reason for a behavior, and usually we can describe the functions. Oh, sorry, I'm reading Ashley's from Redcliffe. Oh, you're not far, that's good. So usually when we talk about behaviors, and when we talk about the functions of behaviors, we can talk about, or we can understand that it could be escape. And we go into this a lot more in my Roots of Behaviour course. So the child might be trying to escape from a situation because they want to avoid what they're doing. It could be too demanding. It could be a non-preferred activity, but they're trying to get away from it. Maybe it's a math assignment and they just don't want to do it. They don't like math. Yeah, so escaping or avoiding different situations. Some kids escape things because they don't want to be the center of attention. Some kids escape because, yeah, they don't like the task or the activity. Some kids escape because of sensory demands are too high and they want to get away from that. Okay, so there's escape. There is tangible. So tangible is when we want an object. I always talk about the grocery store when you're walking through the checkout, and there's always like the chocolate bars and the magazines and everything there. And the kids that have the meltdown because they want the chocolate bar and mom says no. And that's a prime example of a tangible item. They want that tangible object and they've been told no. Or more recently, we hear it with kids who want screen time. So they want to have time on their screen and you say no, and then they have a meltdown. So it's a tangible activity or an object. And then some kids, they want attention or connection. And some kids want sensory. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more, because we can also break that down into the primary cause of behavior being to obtain or to avoid. And I hadn't thought of that, and I just read about that again recently, so it came back to the forefront. So you can be misbehaving because you're trying to obtain attention, an object, or sensory input. You can also be avoiding or escaping attention, an object or task, or sensory input. And so we really dive into this reason for behavior in the Roots of Behaviour class, but I just wanted to touch on it here. So if you're watching and listening and you have access, I want to know, what are some of the behaviors that you're seeing at home? Are you seeing hitting, biting, chewing? This is a new behavior that we've seen in our house and at school with my son. And he's never been a chewer before, but I seem to remember his older brother was a chewer, and he outgrew it. So Joshua will come home and his shirt will be wet, his sleeve will be wet, and he's chewing on his clothing. And so we're trying to figure out why he's doing this. My quick fix would be to give him gum, and I did that. I gave him gum, and I give him alternative things to chew on, but I'm really trying to get to the root of the problem and trying to figure out why he's chewing. So, yeah, anybody? Oh, we've got an answer. Jade wins the prize. Whining, right? So I have a very low tolerance for whining, and my kids, yeah, I'm seeing more of it now too, Jade, because I talked about this on my Instagram post today about that tolerance, that window of tolerance. And when our window of tolerance is decreased, so that's like when it also relates to our level of arousal and our alertness, but when we're set off by things, when we're triggered by things, we see more behaviors. And whining is a behavior that we see. Hi, Amy. We'll see a lot more of when kids are uncomfortable. We'll see crying. Just they're trying to communicate something, right? And so we need to figure out what it is that behavior, what purpose and what function that behavior is serving. So what are some other behaviors that we're seeing? Anybody else want to share? And my question to you, Jade, would be when are you seeing whining? Because if we want to figure out behavior and we want to get to the root of the behavior, we need to get really, really specific. Like, what are we seeing? If we're defining the behavior, it needs to be defined so well that I can look at the child and say, aha, I see that. Yeah, I see that behavior. And grandma can look at the child and say, yeah, I see that behavior. And, you know, anybody who sees the child says the same thing, like it's what you're seeing. So we define this behavior and then we figure out what the function of the behavior really is. And we do this scientifically. We have a questionnaire that we go through, and it asks a number of questions, and it's like a scale. So if you answer 1, it goes to a certain area and then it gets scored, and you can tell by your answers when the child's scores add up. The highest scores will tell you if it's escape, if it's tangible, if it's attention seeking, and if it's sensory. Okay, so we go through this and we try to figure out what is the function of that behavior. We also dive into a bit more sensory, because, you know, if we just deal with the behavior, right now there's lots of behaviors going on because we're overwhelmed and our kids are overwhelmed. There's a lot of things going on. So that's adding to the behaviors because we're in this heightened level of arousal. We're in this smaller window of tolerance, so things get to us a little bit more, things set us off a little bit more. But if we don't figure out what the real problem is, then we're just kind of putting a band-aid on it. And I'm looking at this note here, and it says, if we make the mistake of addressing only the behavioral aspects of the problem, the base sensory problem will still exist, and the child may exhibit more frustration, they may act out more, all those emotions are gonna boil up. So I'm just gonna check and see who's on here. But really, we need to get to the base of it. And I say the sensory problem because a lot of our behaviors stem from sensory. So if we look at sensory is our base, you maybe have seen, if you follow me on social media, you've seen this picture of the tree, and at the bottom is our sensory, and then all of the branches are the different functions that sensory has. And one of the branches is behavior. So the behavior is an offshoot of our sensory foundation. So I'm just gonna say hi to everybody. Alana's here, hi. Emily's here, hi. Amy's here. Jade is here. Chi is here. I hope I'm saying your name right. Rick, Deidre, Ashley, hello everyone. I'm so glad you're here, or were here and popped off. So I don't want to keep you forever tonight, but I just wanted to get the conversation going about the roots of behavior and why it's so important to really figure out why that behavior is happening before we try to manage it with different strategies. Because there's really two schools of thought. And one of my colleagues, she talks about this. There's the top-down approach, which she addresses behaviors from a top-down approach. She gives parents strategies that they can use right now that are going to help that behavior. But she says so herself, they're not going to help them in a different environment. So as soon as we change up a piece of that behavior, a piece of that demand, we get the behavior again. So when we work from a bottom-up approach, which is what I do, then we get to the root of the behavior so that the strategies that we're putting in place are helping the child with their behavior, with their learning, with their motor skills, and it carries over from one place to the next. It's not just a splinter skill. That's what we call it in OT. It's not just a splinter skill where we're just fixing it in this one particular situation. We're looking at the whole picture and trying to help the child manage. We're trying to help adapt the environment if we need to adapt the environment. We're trying to help the child function without these behaviors that are interfering. So, does